Okay friends, in this next part of the video about T S Eliot as a critic, we will be discussing some of the important points from his essay Tradition and Individual Talent. So the essay Tradition and Individual Talent is considered as the unofficial critical manifesto of T S Eliot. In this essay, he focuses on the theory of tradition and of the theory of impersonality of art. Now coming to the term tradition. So the word tradition seemed to be a disagreeable term to Eliot's contemporary people, maybe because of the English mindset or because of the influence of romanticism and the romantic theories that were popular in the before the 20th century. So romanticism gives importance for novelty, for originality of a work. Okay. Originality or newness. The poet creates something new, and if a critic or someone praises a work, they will focus on those points where the poet least resembles with the work of his or her predecessors. But Eliot upholds the point of view that if we analyze a poet without any sort of bias or prejudice, we will be able to observe that the best and individual parts of a poet's work are those in which the poet's predecessors, the dead poets, the great poets assert their immortality most vigorously. So the poet is not able to escape that tradition. The presence can be always felt, and it is not possible for the poet to turn out to be great by creating something new. That tradition will be always there in his piece of work. Tradition is not simply imitating the ancients. It is not blind adherence to the works of the ancients. Tradition cannot be inherited. A poet has to acquire tradition with great scholarship. He has to work hard. He should be an erudite. He should come across the works starting from Homer to his day, and he should develop a sense of history, a sense of the great tradition. And if the poet is having that sense of that great tradition, he will be able to experience not only the pastness of the past, the pastness of the past, but the presentness of the past. Presentness. What Eliot means is that if a poet is creating a work, he or she should not deal simply with the contemporary life or contemporary society, but he has to have a wider vision, a vision that he gets from knowledge of the great tradition starting from Homer to his times, his or her times. It is in connection with this that Eliot states, no poet, no artist can create his complete meaning alone. The poet should have the sense of the timeless and the temporal, the present and the past, and it is this which enables him, this which aids him in his critical enterprise, not in his critical enterprise, in his creative enterprise. And the past is not something static, it can be altered. It is said the past is altered by the present, as well as the present is guided by the past. Let us take an example. Eliot's work The Wasteland, published in 1922, and there was a past order of the tradition of literature that existed before the day in which The Wasteland was published, the day from the ancient days of Homer to the day before The Wasteland was published. So when Eliot's work The Wasteland demands entry into this order of literature, the entire order changes. So before the day of publication of The Wasteland, there was an order, and when this new work enters the literary canon, enters this order, the entire order changes. The past is getting reordered or redefined. The poet allows the great tradition to assert its immortality on his poems. The poet realizes that the creators of that great tradition are present in him or her, and what he or she creates is a recreation of what they have created. So this is Eliot's meaning of tradition. A poet with this sense of tradition is aware of the vastness of the mind or culture to which he belongs, and when that realization is there, the poet becomes aware of the magnificence of that tradition, and he surrenders his personality before the superior authority of tradition. So the progress of a poet is not that of self-expression, it is that of self-surrender. Okay. Ultimately, there will be an extinction of personality, and poetry is not self-expression. So it is a self-realization that there is a vast tradition behind him. So this here Eliot is moving toward the impersonal theory of art. Eliot's theory is in a way a reaction to the subjective approach of Romanticism. The Wordsworth's famous definition is there: poetry is the spontaneous overflow of emotions. Eliot outrightly rejects such an idea, and he comes up with this revolutionary theory of impersonality. He says that it is not an expression, it is not a spontaneous overflow of emotions, there is something that happens in the mind of the poet. The mind of the poet is like a receptacle of different feelings. The poet at a moment may be affected by different sensations. He may be hearing the sound of a typewriter, the smell of cooking, the philosophy, the Oriental philosophy or philosophy of Spinoza. He may be having a personal love affair. So all these emotions are there in his mind, and it is fused together into a new artistic whole. According to Eliot, a modernist, a poem should be a very complex one. So the poet requires immense power or immense concentration for publishing or for creating such a great work, and his mind can be compared to the smithy of a blacksmith, where different materials are amalgamated into new compounds. And in order to make the relationship between tradition and this process of poetic creation more clear, Eliot comes up with the example of a chemical reaction in which we are making use of a catalyst. We know a catalyst is something that invigorates the chemical reaction, but the catalyst will not undergo any change. So here Eliot takes up the example of the production of sulfurous acid. When a piece of fine platinum is introduced into a gas chamber containing oxygen and sulfur dioxide, and there is platinum there, sulfurous acid is created, but platinum is not undergoing any change. So here the mind of the poet is compared to a catalyst. So he is there in forming different compounds. Okay, in the mind of the poet, different compounds are coming, and in the process of artistic creation, new products are formed. But the poet is not expressing himself. There is no change for the catalyst, like that there is no change for the poet. Nothing related with the poet is expressed. So here this oxygen and sulfur dioxide are like emotions and feelings, and platinum is the mind of the poet. The poet creates new artistic wholes, and he is not at all part of this chemical reaction. So this is through this example, Eliot is trying to define or trying to give a more clear idea regarding the impersonal process of poetic creation. The next term that we are going to discuss is objective correlative. So this particular term was used by T S Eliot in his essay on Hamlet. So objective correlative was a term that was coined by an American painter, Washington Allston, but it is Eliot who popularized this particular word. By objective correlative, Eliot is trying to familiarize us with a technique that a writer can make use of in expressing emotions. As a classicist, we know Eliot is against the romantic theory of self-expression. So, from Eliot's point of view, if a writer wants to evoke some particular form of emotion from the audience, he or she has to depend on objective correlative. Okay. So, objective correlative means a set of objects, a situation, a chain of events which can be considered as a formula for evoking certain reaction, certain emotional reaction from the audience. And if the writer fails to have such an objective correlative, that work will turn out to be an artistic failure, and that is why Eliot considers Shakespeare's masterpiece Hamlet as an artistic failure, and not a single word, not a single object, not a single situation will be sufficient for evoking that particular emotion. So, there should be a set of objects, okay, a set of reactions which can emanate such an emotional reaction from the part of the audience. The concept of objective correlative puts emphasis on the work of art as an artifact. So, the poet is not personally expressing his emotions, he is making use of a medium, and what the poet is trying to be objective, and what the poet has to convey is expressed through that medium. As a successful instance of objective correlative, Eliot comes up with the sleepwalking scene in William Shakespeare's Macbeth. There, the different episodes from her past life are enacted by Lady Macbeth, and the audience is able to realize the feelings that are going on in her mind. At the same time, Shakespeare's Hamlet is considered as an artistic failure because Hamlet is over dominated by one particular emotion, and he is not successful in conveying that emotion by making use of an objective correlative. So, Hamlet lacks an objective correlative, and Eliot considers his masterpiece as a failure. As a poet, Eliot is in favor of the prosaic style in poetry. It means the spoken form that is prevalent during the poet's time. Anyway, Eliot is not in favor of using colloquialisms in his poetry, and he is not supporting a poetic style in prose. He is having high admiration for Dante, the Italian poet who makes use of a prosaic style. To sum up, Eliot as a critic is not free from defects. His religious attitude is evident in most of his critical as well as creative works. There are elements of didacticism in many of his pronouncements, and in his attack on Shelley and Milton, we can find his religious or political bias evident. But as a critic, many of his statements are complete or conclusive, and new criticism which emerged in the 20th century owes a debt to T S Eliot. Many of his ideas are having similarity with that of the new critics, but Eliot, however, was not much in favor of these new critics, and even criticized them as the lemon squeezer school of criticism. But Eliot has coined a number of terms, and these terms have acquired wide popularity, like terms like objective correlative, unification of sensibility, dissociation of sensibility. No critic after Aristotle has had that much influence on English literature or English literary criticism like T S Eliot. Thank you for your patient listening.